It's time for Recipe of the Day. Chicken breasts are often my nemesis. You've probably heard me talk about how I like to make them like the best way possible by brining them and then slightly pounding them just a little bit to get them to an even thickness. And that's all done to make them less dry and really juicy and flavorful because I tend to find them a little bit dry and a little bit bland. If you would like to hear me talk about how to brine chicken breasts, there is an episode for that you go to cookthestory.com/ROTD, and everything there is arranged by date. So you're looking for the episode from February 20th of 2024, or just go to cookthestory.com and search for brine chicken breasts. And actually, I just checked. If you just go to Google and search for brine chicken breasts, the Cook the Story post comes up first. So you can just go to Google and get it there also. But now today, I'm telling you what I do if I have chicken breasts and I haven't brined them, but I want to have them for dinner and I want them to be amazing. And that tends to be breading them to give them a nice crunchy crust. And then sometimes I'll do a little dip on the side, some honey mustard, maybe some ranch, something like that, just in case they do end up a little bit dry. But really, by doing them in the air fryer like we're going to for this recipe, I find they get a little bit less dry. They're just in the heat for less time somehow, and they turn out great. Now, I am telling you today both about how to do crispy breaded chicken breasts that are whole chicken breasts, and also how to do crispy cutlets. And it's basically the same process, so I figured I'd put it in one episode and you'll learn two things at once. Really, the only differences are how long they're going to be cooking for, and then crucially with the chicken breast, because they're in there for longer, they're in there for like 20 minutes versus more like 8-ish minutes for the cutlet, you don't want to spray or oil the breadcrumbs for the chicken breast. They're going to get nice and brown without the oil, and in fact, maybe even get too brown if you oil them. Whereas the cutlets, they need that help browning because they're in there for less time. So you are going to spray with cooking spray those breaded cutlets before they go into the air fryer. So if you're going to cook the chicken breasts whole, you can fit about 3 of them in the air fryer. If they're more than 6 or 7 ounces each, I would really cut them in half on the diagonal because they're going to be really big and they're going to take up too much room and they're going to take a long time to cook. I like to cut them diagonally so you get kind of like a rounded edge and a more pointed triangular edge or like corner on each one, and they kind of look like 2 smaller chicken breasts. Okay, so that is how you prep it if you're doing sort of full chicken breast or just like halved but still plump chicken breast. To do the cutlets, you're actually going to split the chicken breast in half, going like through the middle. If you've laid your chicken breast on a cutting board, you're running a knife through it with your knife held parallel to the cutting board, slicing through. Now you can stop there. That's actually a fairly nice thin cutlet at that point, maybe a little bit thick-ish. Or if you want them a little bit thinner, you can then put them between some plastic wrap and pound them a little bit with a mallet just to thin them out a little bit more. You don't really want to go any thinner than 1/4 inch though. Why might you turn these into cutlets? It does stretch them further, right? You get sort of more portions per amount of chicken if each person takes 1 of these and you've halved them, right? I also find that they're a little bit more tender. It's that same thing we talk about when I'm talking about how you slice beef. You know, I talk about thin slices and going against the grain, and it's to make those meat fibers less long so that you're doing less chewing, and that gives you the sensation of less toughness, right? So if your chicken is thin, then your fibers are definitely smaller, and then you're definitely doing less chewing, and so it definitely comes across as a little bit more tender. When you get a big piece of chicken in your mouth, it's thick, then you're chewing more, then it's tougher seeming, you know? So whether you have the plumper chicken breasts or the cutlets, you're going to set those aside and you're going to put some flour in one dish, season that with some salt and pepper and give it a stir. And I will tell you, my grandmother, my Ukrainian baba, used to always tell me to taste the flour. I know that sounds not so good, but like I literally just pick up a little bit of flour between my fingers, put it in my mouth, and see if it tastes seasoned. Does it taste good? She was such a great cook. I learned so much from her. So that is a great tip there. Oh, and you can also add some garlic powder to that flour. That's going to work as well. Then mix that, set that aside, and then you're going to do 1 or 2 eggs in a bowl. Honestly, the chicken cutlet recipe calls for 2 eggs. The chicken breast recipe calls for 1. I usually just eyeball it depending on how much chicken it looks like I'm going to have. And so you put an egg in a bowl, give it a whisk, And then you're going with another bowl with some panko breadcrumbs. I love using the panko breadcrumbs for this because they have their own nice crunchiness to them. And so anything that you put them on ends up with that crunch. So you want to make some really crunchy chicken breast or really crunchy chicken breast cutlets. The panko breadcrumbs are going to be the thing. Now you can season those breadcrumbs lightly. I'm going to say that for the chicken breasts that are in the air fryer for longer, you could put a little bit of salt or pepper, but I wouldn't put any garlic or garlic powder because that's going to be on the outside of the chicken and it's in there for a while. It gets a little bit overly browned and that can be a little bitter. So for the chicken breast, I wouldn't put garlic. A little bit of salt is fine. For the chicken breast cutlets, the recipe that I'm linking to has some minced garlic clove in there. I find that a little bit overkill. Like it's just an extra thing I need to do to chop up that garlic. So I like to just do a little bit of garlic powder and that's going to be fine because they're not in there for quite as long. You're not risking getting that bitterness going. Okay. From there, you are putting the chicken into the flour, turn it around in there so it's lightly coated, dust it off. You don't want like an excess of flour on there. Then it goes into the egg. So basically what's happening there is the flour sticks to the chicken because the chicken is damp. And then the egg sticks to the flour because the egg's wet and the flour is dry. And then they're forming this like base that now the breadcrumbs will stick to. So finally going into the breadcrumbs, turn it over. I do like to pile the breadcrumbs over top and push down on them. So basically you've got your bowl or plate with the panko breadcrumbs on it. You put your chicken on top of that pile of breadcrumbs and then spoon or use your fingers to get some of those breadcrumbs up on top of the chicken and then push down. And that's just going to adhere them better. You're putting that pressure on. Now, like I said earlier, for the cutlets, you can give them a spritz of cooking spray to help those breadcrumbs brown. For the chicken breasts that are going in for a little bit longer, don't use the spray. It's going to brown without them. And if anything, the spray could help them to over brown. If you have a wire rack that came with your air fryer, it's a good idea to use that because it's going to allow the breadcrumbs underneath the chicken to crisp up as well as just the one on top. So if you have that, great. If not, it's still going to be good, just not quite as crisp on the bottom. So then you are transferring the chicken into the air fryer basket so that it is a single layer and you're cooking them at different temperatures and times depending on the kind of chicken you are going with. So for those cutlets, that is going to be 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 8 minutes. They are going to be cooked through and they're going to be nice and crispy in that time. You can cut into one just to make sure. For the chicken breast, that's going to be 350 degrees Fahrenheit and that's going to be for 18 to 22 minutes. You want it to be 165 degrees Fahrenheit before you take it out. Use an instant read thermometer to read that or cut into one at the thickest point to make sure it's not pink in the middle. That is it. You get crispy chicken breasts and you can dip them in something or have them just as they are. You could even finish them off in a really special way if you just heat up some tomato sauce like in the microwave or on the stove. Once your chicken is done, nice and crispy, put it on some plates and then put some mozzarella cheese on each one, shredded mozzarella cheese, and then spoon that hot tomato sauce over top. The cheese between the hot chicken and the hot tomato sauce is totally going to melt and you're going to have the easiest chicken parmigiana ever. I will put the links to the breaded chicken breasts and the breaded chicken cutlets, both done in the air fryer, in the show notes for this podcast episode, as well as that brined chicken breast recipe as well in the show notes for this podcast episode. Or head to cookthestory.com/ROTD and get it there. Everything there is arranged by date, as I mentioned. And so you are looking for the episode from September 18th of 2024. If you make this recipe and love it, or if you make any of the recipes from cookthestory.com or from my other site, thecookful.com, I would really appreciate it if you would leave a comment and a 5-star rating. That really helps me build my business. It lets other people know what you thought of the recipes, makes them more likely to make them. The 5-star ratings, people see those when they're searching on Google, and then they're more likely to click over and come, maybe even become a listener of this podcast. So it really helps me out when you do those 5-star ratings. And you know, I love hearing the comments and getting your feedback on what you made and what you loved. So if you make this one, if you make any of them, make sure you go and leave a comment and a rating. Thank you so much. I'm Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, the all new chicken cookbook, and from this podcast, Recipe of the Day. I hope you have a great day. Let's get cooking.